in this passage, Jesus and his followers are among friends. They're in a place called Bethany. This is where Jesus and his friends love hanging out. This is sort of home ground for them. They're with Lazarus, with Mary, with Martha. We've heard of them before. We know that some of the previous stories. Jesus has just demonstrated his authority over life and death by raising Lazarus from the dead, which must be a really interesting dinner conversation, by the way. Like, did you see a big light? Did you all of those sort of questions? Must be quite a disturbing conversation if you're about to eat. That's another anyway. So in the bigger picture of John, just remember that Jesus is going to die in about 6 days' time. All right. So John spends a lot of time zeroing in on the last week of Jesus' life, and so we're right at the pointy end of Jesus' life and his story. And Mary chooses this moment of all the moments to pour a bottle of pure nard, which is essentially what we'd call today a very, very rare essential oil. For those who understand these things, worth the equivalent of 1 year's wages. Just have a think about how much money you make in the course of a year, and think about then how you would use it in one single transaction. Just bearing in mind that the minimum wage for somebody working full time, according to the Australian Union's website, is nudging $50,000. We're talking about an act of incredible generosity, an act of almost reckless. It's an act of incredible generosity, unbridled worship, complete, utter, total surrender and loyalty. Yeah. Let's just start with this point this morning. Radical generosity leaves a stench. The reason I say that, verse 3, the house was filled with the fragrance. And let's just face it, that in any church, the minute you start talking about money, everyone smells something, don't they? All right? Everyone starts thinking about something that probably comes from where they've come from, or where they're going, and all that sort of stuff. And it prompts in this story a whole bunch of people who have a whole bunch of varied opinions about it. Let's just admit that when it comes to money and generosity, all of us come from different experiences. And all of those things leave a lingering smell, I'm going to say, about how we would read this passage. Okay? So for example, growing up in my family, I remember a week where a $50 note went missing. And we didn't eat a lot that week. Anyone remember those days? Doesn't seem to be much of a big deal these days, but it certainly was. And what it's done to me in many respects is make me actually tend to be a bit more careful with my money. That's I guess the impact of that. Our ideas about generosity can be informed by the concerns about interest rates, about cost of living, about what's around the next corner. Judas' views on generosity are formed by his own role as a thief, and John's pretty clear about his. He hasn't got much time for Judas, has he? Some of the things he just said in that passage. Not that he cared. I think was the word in that passage. It can be twisted with the important issues of the day, like poverty. Your perspective might have come from a previous church that talked about money way too much, or maybe not nearly enough. And you might think when the pastor talks about money, they must be in a bad place. And I actually chose to talk about money today while we're in a good place, in preparation for the day when we're not. And just to be honest about that, I'm choosing to do that. I guess in that, So some of us have come from some other churches that have some bad experiences, or maybe even some bad theology about giving. Churches don't always have a great name, do they, when it comes to using money? And the other side of that coin is sometimes churches don't even know how to spend it. There's a couple of people who just squirmed in their seat just there. I hope we can actually poke some fun at ourselves on this topic. Is that all right? I do not have a Ferrari. No, I'm sorry. Although I'm pretty sure Ryan would be keen. Anyway, no.
Has Brian got a Ferrari coming?
No, no, he does not. There's no Ferraris in our future. Where was I? I'm going to show you a photo. A couple of years ago, Bruce was up on the roof in our church, and that's about all I need to say about it, isn't it? He was investigating a leaking gutter, and he came across something that probably wasn't built right the first time this church was built. That, my friends, is a milk carton, an empty milk carton. I am assuming money was tight that week, and I would love to know. I have asked everybody I could think of about who was involved in the construction of this place. I'm really interested to know the backstory of that. If anybody knows it, I'd love to hear it. All right? I just hope we can have... I just smile each time I think of that. Sometimes our view of generosity can be informed by some really good experiences, which is the other side of the story. Many of you have been on the receiving end of being blessed, financially, practically, and it leaves a smell, doesn't it? Some of you have been able to bless others in a significant way, and you know that feeling of just immense joy that you get when you do it? You can't tell me that Jesus wasn't right when he said it's better to give than receive, because I think that sensation cannot be replicated by anything, quite frankly. About a year after we left the police force, and while studying, having no idea what the future sort of held for us, we were up in Billawheeler at the time. We had a lot of uncertainty going around. We had done a lot of our sums, and we knew things would get tight. You expect large bills to come, and you budget for large bills to come, but nothing sort of replicates the weight of when you get them. One year, our school fees arrived for the girls, and they came by email. And the bill used to come at the start of the year. I think at the time it was $5,000 or $6,000, and it was one of those ones you just swallow hard when you read. The problem was with the email was it says that there was nothing owing on the bill, and I was like, I called the school, knowing we hadn't paid it, and said, look, you guys have made a clerical error. You need to fix it up so we can pay the bill. And she's like, you don't understand. Your school fees have been paid. In that week, where you started to doubt the goodness and capacity of God to trust you, I think he gives you moments like that to remember, I will never let you down. I will never let you go without. It might seem weird, it might seem crazy, it might always turn up in places you didn't think it would, but he never misses his people. And those sort of stories leave a smell for me now. I used to be the guy who was concerned about every $50, and I still do that a little bit. But my story is now marked by a different sort of generosity. And those things are meant to, I think, remind us that God can and he does provide. And let's just start this discussion about generosity. And I'm only really touching the surface of this whole topic today, but by saying we all come from different places, okay? But let's not let us detract from the radical thing that Mary gives Jesus in this story. Jesus invites his followers to radically pour themselves out, whatever they own, in his service for him. And regardless of how you read this story, Jesus loves this act, doesn't he? In the same story in Mark 14, he says, I tell you, wherever the good news is preached, this woman's deed will be remembered and discussed. So what he's quietly saying to his followers is one day you're going to go and give your life to tell people about me, that I'm God in the flesh who have come to free people from their sin. I'm victorious over death. I'll bring eternal life. Oh, and don't forget about Mary, who saw it and poured out all she had, because she got the enormity of what Jesus was there to do. Okay, so Jesus is highlighting, he is elevating for us a moment of incredible worship, of extraordinary devotion, of reckless abandon, of unbelievable surrender. Now contrast this to Judas's comment, which projects something I'm going to call an outer veneer of spiritual responsibility. But what he's quietly saying is, what a ridiculous waste of money, isn't he? So let's just wrestle with this tension for a second. What the passage seems to imply is that the opposite of generosity is safe, socially acceptable, responsible giving, doesn't it? Let's. I'm not saying we should trade predictable giving for a more reckless and unpredictable response. Everyone okay? The Bible has a lot to say about consistent stewardship. It has a lot to talk about giving your first fruits, storehouse giving a tenth, a tithe of your income, which I personally believe is a really good starting point. And certainly, consistent giving absolutely helps our treasurer and our church plan for the future. Otherwise, I'm sure Ian's hair will be falling out. Okay, it's doing it all right at the moment. So all of that is important. I'm not detracting from consistent good stewardship, and I never will. But dare I say it, there are also God-orchestrated moments of opportunity where you realise I've been holding it too tight. There are also moments you realise I've been making this pursuit too much about myself. I was going to use it for this. I don't really need that. I'm going to, understanding that it was his to begin with and that his kingdom's bigger and better than mine, maybe it's time to pour some of it out to him. The interesting thing here about nard is that wherever Jesus goes, this act of generosity will live on. Because the smell of pure nard lasts wherever Jesus goes for at least 10 days. Which is really, really interesting. Just consider this. Later in the week, when Jesus gets nailed to a cross, the smell of this generosity is going to linger for a whole crowd of people. In a week's time, when Jesus walks out of that grave, when he could smell like death, he smells like this. Okay? And I'm not advocating for recklessness. Is everybody okay? And normal, predictable, safe, easy giving is a really, really good thing. But sometimes we get so caught up in the predictable that we forget that there are moments of opportunity to pour it out. And the key, I reckon, is that the key in this is probably to understand and to discern what are those moments with God's help that I do that, and when am I willing to live in faith? But those are some very significant questions, and let's just face it, they're hard to answer, aren't they? So maybe the question is, how do you know when the right moments are? I think the answer is simply to open your eyes, because the last observation I have to share this morning is, I think, a very, very significant one. Generosity is determined by what you spend your time looking at. There is in this story a great insight into every character and what they are looking at that ultimately is going to determine what they will give themselves to. And I hope you'll give me a little bit of creative license this morning as I share this. Let's just start with Lazarus. I imagine Lazarus about now would be a bit of a celebrity. He's just been raised from the dead. Can Can you imagine him walking down the main street of town now? How you going? People who came to his funeral maybe are a bit upset. You know? Imagine him walking into his workplace going, hey boss, is there still a job for me? Or have you replaced me already? You know? Imagine him being poked and prodded by his doctor down the street or something like that, you know? After your chest hasn't been breathing for a while, I would think that after you've been dead and you come back to life, you probably spend a little bit of your time just sitting watching your chest rise and fall. Now, maybe I'm wrong, but I would suggest that what Lazarus is doing is maybe looking a little bit too much at himself. Okay? Now think about Judas. He has the same problem as well. Judas, we know, John names him very clearly as a thief whose only concern is lining his own pockets. So here's the thing. If you're looking at yourself, then you are ultimately going to find a whole bunch of areas that need investment, aren't you? Gym memberships and all that sort of stuff. All good things. Consider for a second the disciples. They have walked a couple of days from where they were to where they are. They've had to stress over the whole emotional, intense roller coaster of losing somebody they're really close to. And we all know what those sort of moments are like. They just weigh you down. And we finally get there, we're physically, mentally exhausted, only to see Jesus raise some guy from the dead. And that just prompts a whole bunch of questions that I don't have answers for. And I don't know how to deal with that. And I think the disciples' response in this story over dinner is probably to, let's just face it, Sunday lunch. Anybody have those? You've had a big day. You've had a big week. It's been going on for a while. I finally got a good meal. I just want to sit down and have a sleep. Anybody else have that problem on a Sunday afternoon? Okay. Here's the problem. When your eyes are closed, you can't see opportunities for generosity, can you? If your eyes are closed, you can't see people to be generous to. If you're exhausted, it's hard to notice opportunities. Now consider Martha for a second. And notice she clearly has not learnt from last time, from the last conversation, because she's back at work in the kitchen again. Okay, she's probably the person who's the hospitality manager, making sure there's the right cut of meat with the right quality of bread, the right good salads. She's probably the person who's making sure that everything's working, everybody's got something in their drink, everything gets done, everyone gets served, and probably dreaming one day of that Thermomix is going to make everything better. All right? And I imagine that Martha's, what Martha is looking at is a to-do list. It is a list of endless other things where I could be looking. And if that's what you're looking at, let's just face it, there's always going to be something more important or something more time sensitive that's got to get done before Jesus gets done. And remember what Jesus said to Martha earlier in Luke chapter 10. He said, "My dear Martha, you are worried and upset over all of the details when there is only one thing worth being concerned about, or dare I say, one thing worth looking at. Mary has discovered it all, and it won't be taken away from her." Mary has decided and has got this right, hasn't she? She has set her eyes on the glory of Jesus. And because she is listening to his voice, walking in step with him, and is sensitive to what he is leading, she understands and discerns this is the moment that God in the flesh has entered the world. This is the moment probably where he is here to show the glory of who he is and who he will become in the future. She probably understands and knows from looking at him and senses that death for him is just around the corner. And because she has her eyes set on him, she chooses to pour out everything she has at the right moment. I think she knows that this is her moment to pour out probably close to everything she's got in an act of complete surrender, and it's an act of surrender of self, isn't it? To the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords is in my living room. And I'm going to choose my moment, and this is it. There will always be needs around us. That's the unfortunate nature of money. And there will always be people, unfortunately, in some level of poverty. Isn't it great, by the way, that we're able as a church, in many respects, with Monday night, with partnering with Loaves and Fishes and the night shelter and so many other places to be able to help in that space. But there are also moments of opportunity. There are also moments where knowing how short our time is on this earth and knowing our moment in eternity, where Jesus invites us to turn our eyes off all the other things and to turn our eyes to him and to invest in places that seem probably a little bit extreme to everybody else. Maybe it is investing in a person, or maybe even a neighbour who you know is in need, and you have the capacity to bless them. Maybe it's financial, maybe it's just helping them lift a cup of tea. Maybe it's making them a cup of tea. Maybe it's just the act of going to visit and saying hi. It could be somebody on the mission field. It could be somebody stepping into a ministry role. Dare I say it? Yes, it could even involve the church. It might be. Look, I don't have much spare money, and $10 for me is something that I really have trouble giving away. But I'm going to put a $10 note in my wallet, and I'm going to leave it there for the day that God directs me to give it away. If that's your scenario, there's no shame in that. And because it's not something that's meant to give you glory or make you the center of the attention, it can often, and I think it should be done quietly, without fanfare. And maybe it's even something you want to do in your will. Okay? Can I just be honest about something? Can I be very, very clear about something with everyone? I am not going to tell you this morning or give you any ideas, any sales pitches, nothing about what you do with your money. Everyone okay? It's not my place. I will share those opportunities when they come. I hope you'll give me the grace to do that. What you choose to do with this message is entirely between you and him. It is something that a healthy church needs to wrestle with. It's something that there are numerous ways that Jesus might ask you to invest in his work in some way, shape or form, but I'll come back to this again. Generosity is so often determined by the thing that you set your mind, your eyes, your heart, your attention, and all of your devotion is focused on. If your eyes are on Jesus, generosity will not be a problem. If your eyes are on everything else, it may be a challenge. So rather than talk about money this morning, I'm going to finish by saying this. What is the thing that you are fixated on right now? What is that uncomfortable thing that you know that you find yourself dreaming about having maybe just a bit too often? What is that issue on the to-do list that just always keeps coming to the top, that just comes and gets all of your investment and all that sort of stuff? And can I invite you instead to turn your eyes and your heart and your mind away from things that Jesus says will never last and will never make for anything into eternity? And will you instead turn your mind and your attention, your heart and your eyes towards him? To let him determine how best you maximize or steward what he has given. And yes, that absolutely includes your money. No one seems to be laughing, but that's okay. I'm going to invite Ray to come and pray for us this morning, and I'm going to leave you to sit with that comment. Remember, it's between you and the Lord, and I'd suggest we just leave it there. And if you need to have a conversation about that, not this week, but okay.